Welcome back everybody, it's DestinysJesus here. Today we've got another 3-level video and we're covering the most important part of the game in my opinion, which is early to mid game. We're looking at 3 levels of players, our beginner, intermediate and pro with Zexro, covering a bunch of things that they're doing that's really useful in games to fix your off spawn strategy and tweak it a little bit to have the most success in winning your drops, as well as a bunch of really useful mid-game strategies that you can apply to your own game and set you up nicely to either get in fights that are smart or avoid fights and set you up well for endgame. Hope you guys enjoy the video. So he scouts, he knows how many people are here, he knows if he's going to get contested. Getting all this information early basically saves you that risk when you're rotating mid-game and you're not really sure. So he checks how many people in the POIs near him, how many people are landing above him. That's very useful information, right? This is something super important when it comes down to contesting or just learning a new drop spot when preparing for an event. It's making sure you're landing at a spot that gives you a loot advantage, as well as some other kind of advantage going to fight. That can be something like a flank, or maybe high ground, or just something that you can get a beam from naturally. It's really important to map out something like that when you go into your games. So to begin with, Zexro's landing at this building here. It's got 3 chests, a lot of floor spawns, so he's got a good chance of getting like a charge off spawn as well, which is really useful. As well as he's got this freezer here, and these 2 normal boxes. That might not look like the biggest thing, but that freezer could be potentially a slurp fish, because it now gives you 2 fish, right? And the non-boxes potentially is extra shield. You could either get coconuts, or the 2 different types of shield mushrooms. From there, Zexro leaves with a good amount of mats, and he's able to push straight up onto this middle building here. This kind of cuts off what the other guy would be doing, who potentially lands up here. Cuts off his rotate choices, gives Zexro high ground, 2 extra chests for free. You've also got to think about how the other person contesting this spot would think. They'd see Zexro landing down at the south side. They know he'd have the more loot potential, so they want to be quite rapid. They'd probably rush loot in this house, maybe miss a couple floor spawns, get the 2 chests, and then rotate over this way and try getting down here. While Zexro automatically has the high ground advantage, you can probably get a beam for free off the roof. For our semi-pro, when it comes to contesting our spawn, he does a really bad job of scouting. He knows there's one player landing near him, but he doesn't really scout the other side at all. Doesn't really make any decisions based off that. And also, because he spent too much time scouting our spawn when he kind of knew there was a guy near him anyway, he ends up scuffing his drop, which could result in him getting killed off spawn or just getting tagged a lot off white, which would kind of slow down his looting process. But in terms of actually having a lot of loot off spawn, he's done a really good job in choosing his building here, right? He's landing at a spot that gives him a lot of natural shield just out the non-boxes, right? Getting coconut shield mushrooms or the other like super shield mushrooms. And compared to the other people near him, so let's say this guy, he has no natural shield to be found, right? He has to just rely on his shield RNG out of chest. And also up north, there's not really anybody going to be here pushing in immediately, just because there's a lot of open space and this guy again has no natural shield to be found. Also coming to another advantage of spawn, our semi-pro, he has a lot of mats that you can farm up here. Basically allows him to cap himself really nicely and get a lot of hard mats immediately. This sets up really nicely just in case somebody was to push him or spawn. He'd also be able to deal with a third party situation. The majority of the time when people die to third parties, it's just because they don't have enough mats to deal with the original fight. This is really nice. He basically takes height melee, gets a nice pre-fast shot there on this guy coming over towards him. Here again, this is a nice bait. You see how he swings on the wall there and then sets up here with this round peak. However, this angle is not the best, mainly because the guy can low ground really easily and get a shot off. Yeah, he gets chunked a lot there, right? It's just from that diagonal angle. It's a nice amount of space. This is a thing where those hard mats are really coming useful here when he's trying to get his heal off. Allows him to get that mini off for free. And that was a nice shot to finish it off. That was really good awareness. He basically just wants to end the fight as soon as possible. Now coming here, he knows he's likely to get pushed while looting up and basically clearing out this area. So he takes his time and actually scouts for anyone pushing in and then goes back to his normal loot path and farms up a little bit at the backside. Our beginner player, he doesn't really do anything correct in this off spawn in my opinion. He lands on the chest here, but he doesn't really know the off spawn place well enough, right? He lands here, comes immediately out back, and he actually rotates towards where there's nothing else apart from floor spawns. If you've got a shotgun off spawn, you don't need to rotate towards floor spawns. You're better off going towards a chest, trying to get an AR since the percent chance is higher. He rotates through here, comes and gets a hunting rifle, which is kind of useless. And then he starts this fight. And this is the thing that I don't like, right? I'd never want to be fighting off spawn with 30 mats, right? You're so much better just rotating towards chests and getting like minimum extra mats and not having to deal with scuff situations where you're just farming like so. He crash pads up, gets 80 white on this guy, and this fight. That was a nice shot, but still, I don't really like the risk of him here. I'd rather, in this case where he knew he lost the drop for this side, why not instead rotate, get this chest, come around here, farm through the wall, get this chest, farm through the wall, get this chest, right? Then you're at least 120 plus mats. You take away all that risk off spawn, and then you can rotate, take high ground with the mats you have, and then play the fight from there. Something small that Zexro does throughout his mid game is making sure he gets a small amount of damage just through like AR tags on other people rotating near him. What this does obviously allows him to get a little bit of Storm Surge if the games are more stacked, but also allows him to create a little bit more of map control for free, right? He tags these players that are rotating opposite him, and he also has natural cover here of the building. That creates a little bit of distance, stops the guys behind him rotating towards him, and allows him to get a little bit further in front and avoid this congested side. So Zexro tags those players up, allows himself a little bit more map control, and allows him to get really, really deep on the end of first moving. He doesn't get quite center, but he gets very deep in here, and this allows him, when second zone pulls, for him to have a quite quick and rapid rotate. The one thing I'd say for this guy's mid game is obviously he spent too much time early rather than just like trying to make a bit of a rotate. And I haven't really seen him check map too much. And the thing is with checking map is really important. This is so useful if you land edge, right? Kind of just understanding what zones look like early to like read them for later, right? So let's say first zone is like this, yeah? Which is somewhat similar to what this guy had. What do you know about this zone, right? You can basically read where it's going to pull next, right? Like whenever zone pulls like this kind of max, you know it's not going to pull like second. I've never seen second zone pull like that on a far max zone, right? You can kind of read which edge it's playing into, so you know it's going to pull something like this maybe inside the zone, or something like this over this side, right? Just because zones are predetermined, like when the game starts, like 50-50 zones like predetermined, which if you like watch a lot of VODs, you can kind of understand like where it's going to pull kind of, right? So this guy, he actively wants to avoid this whole area here, right? Just because it's load of congestion. You've got what kind of choke points, right? You've got that coming down here, all of these waterways like full of people, all these mountains like here, there's gonna be like loads of people just dotted about, right? Just because of where first zone's pulling. I'd also say like this whole area here is gonna be really bad to rotate through just because of the amount of people, right? That he needs to make actively, I'd say from the south side, he just needs to make an active rotate further south and try getting up somewhere along here, right? Mainly because he's just going to run into less people mid-game, and he knows it's going to pull somewhere along this like far east front again. Like he just needs to make an active rotate that way. Let's say he was landing like Collie, right? I'd say either try to like beat the rotate of other people and come in first, or go wide and then come in higher and then obviously wrap like dead side or something like that, right? Something really nice that a beginner player does, he actually rotates towards a secondary loot spot to get in a fight straight away. This is really useful just because most of the time you can get a free beam, or in this case he just gets a free sniper kill here. And that's really nice because it allows him Storm Surge, which is really useful, all the guns and upgrades that guy had, map control, sets him up really nicely, and you always know that's going to be a weaker play, right? If anybody's landing on Frey Island and it's not Frey, they're probably just terrible at the game, so you may as well push them for a free kill. This can be the case literally anywhere on the map, right? If you're landing at more of a low-key spot and there's somebody landing near you, you may as well push them and take a free fight without a third party, right? If you look at, let's say you're landing in this spot, the yellow house, like by the lake, and you see somebody either landing on this hill or down here, right? You may as well push into them and take that free or spawn fight where you're likely to win it and set yourself up really nicely for later in the game. Don't have to worry about Storm Surge as well. Something that Zexro always does throughout his mid-game rotates is he hugs some kind of terrain, whether that be hills or riverbeds or something like that, right? Zexro always uses it to rotate and block off line of sight. In this case here, there was a guy right next to him who didn't get shots off, and Zexro is allowed to box for free without taking any damage. This is really useful just avoiding getting like griefed on your rotates and making sure you don't rotate on top of the crest of hills. Always be mindful of what angles you're open to, and you always want to limit those angles as you rotate through. After sitting in this bush for some Storm Surge tags, Zex actually rotates over to something that he can perm base on, a little bit better position, and this also allows him to refarm. Refarming in solos is so important just because you can keep your mats really high for endgame without needing to get a refresh later on, which obviously has a bit of risk to it. In solos, it's so important to always be able to refarm and also take in some kind of power position, as Zexro does here. Power position just refers to something like a building that's high up or some kind of terrain like a hill that has a bit of elevation to it. He's on the congested edge here, and it pulls far north again, or far east again. And this map at the moment, with the amount of water and everything, it's so reliant on like avoiding like waterways because you can't really cross them later, right? Like this, like what the fuck does he do here? Like how does he rotate this without like just wasting all his shield? You'd be very fortunate not to get tagged here just because of the amount of people. In this game, our beginner was trying to rotate and get a lot of kills off spawn, so what he did was rotate towards a build fight. This is honestly a really good opportunity to get a third party in, but you got to be mindful is because how many movement items there are, like boats and everybody using the whirlpools, that there's going to be so many other like 4th and 5th parties coming in as well to fight, just like he's doing here. Anyone from Sweaty, Pleasant, anybody using Whirlpool basically see this build fight and come over, and that kind of scuffs him because he's not really aware of that. He gets build fought by a lot of different people who come into third party. You can see how much stuff he goes through just in this one fight without even getting any kills yet. Finally, he's able to clean up the third party there, but he basically just ends up fighting somebody who was full HP and he didn't really gain anything out of that, right? In solos, you always want to be trying to gain something and think of what you could actually benefit from taking a fight, whether that be mats, shield, loot, possible upgrades, right? In a fight, you're always going to waste time, and time is the biggest resource in this game if you actually want to do well. Now, coming into the what to fix. For the beginner player especially, I'd say that he needs to make sure you always have a good secondary backup that he knows really well. Let's say you miss your drop for the main building, like Zexro, let's say he misses his drop for his main building. How he can go to Red Barn and especially just go straight to house and get a lot of loot advantage in that fashion by cutting off the other guy's loot path. That's really important to know, as well as fixing a couple of the mid-game mistakes that the beginner player was making, right? He'd always rotate into a really congested area to get a fight in, which it worked in that case we went to Freyland because that was slightly uncontested, right? But then as soon as he went over to the actual main island, there was a lot of players third partying. He got quite scuffed from a couple of the fights, and that's kind of those cases where you're going to such congestion early that it can lead to you just getting third party too many times. I'd also say for an intermediate level player, he needs to be much more aware of how he can wrap dead side early on and reading those first zones, how they're going to pull into second zone since all zones are predetermined, right? He needs to be reading that so much more, as well as coming to Zexro's game. At the end, after he rotated really nicely and stuff, third zone popped up and he just stayed edged on second. Even though he was in that power position, I think he should have rotated center third earlier, because it's quite likely that if he goes center third and gets up a little bit higher, he'd be quite likely to get fourth and set himself up really nicely for in-game. Alright everybody, that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really appreciate the support recently. We've hit like 20,000 subscribers plus in the last month, which is crazy to think about. Make sure to like if you enjoyed, also subscribe if you're new, and make sure to follow my Twitch if you want to catch these streams live when I review.